Hey YouTube, welcome back. We are going to do a quick build review for a character that someone has here. This is a some kind of fire damage, elemental damage over time Paladin. And what we're going to do with this build is first figure out what it is. Second of all, we're going to see whether we can find improvements for the build. And oftentimes those improvements are making the build point all in the same direction. So if this is a crit build, making sure that we get crit in all the places that are important. If this is a ignite build, we're going to get all the ignite stuff that we can possibly get. And if it's something else, then we'll just see what kind of scaling we have available to us, right, to make the whole build work. So it's a level 85 character with 2,000 life, so like that's a little bit low. We have some fire damage, ignite on hit with fire skills, ignite. So maybe this is an ignite build, which means maybe we want like Malin's Hubris, depending on what skills we're using. Maybe we want like some atrophy gloves for some global penetration. Maybe we want like an LP, what's it called over here? Soulfire, the unique relic. So those are the kinds of things that jump to mind first. Let's see, attunement, fire damage over time, phys res health. I try to avoid getting resistance on my body armor as often as possible. I want my body armor to be like Vitality, X, health, percent health. For pretty much all of my characters, especially on a Paladin. So those are the first couple things on my mind here. I see a lot of healing effectiveness, and I wonder if this is like a Javelin Judgment build. We'll see. Ignite on hit, fire damage over time, healing effect, bleed, ignite. It looks like we have ignite and spell LE dots. Let's see what's going on. So I see Javelin, and we have some. Javelin costs less mana, 3 points here, huh? We have some of the points for Javelin as a DPS skill, and then we also have Sacred Forge down here to make our next Judgment deal 60% more damage, and this does apply to the Judgment damage over time, so I see that synergy. These 2 extra points down here should probably go up here instead. This is 20% more damage per point. We should probably be taking as many of these as possible. Maybe even getting like a +1 Javelin somewhere on our gear, because we'd like to have this last point as well. Alright, so it looks like we're a damage over time build. Looks like we're like a healing effect spell elemental damage over time. We have some haste on hit, which doesn't surprise me. I see people using that along with Warpath in order to work haste into their builds. On judgment, I see. Okay, so we're not doing any mana stuff. Interesting. We're not using any mana stuff, and we're also not using any of these big nodes over here. Gotcha. Instead, we're opting into Holy Eruption instead of maxing out AoE and duration and healing effect. I feel like we probably want these other nodes, right? Hey, Casual, welcome. What's going on? I wonder if instead of these 6 nodes here, if we'd rather just grab like the AoE stuff that we already have access to. If I did this, like we're a spell damage over time, right? Build. It's like, why not just grab all this utility? Yeah, 5 out of 5, 4 out of 4, 4 out of 4. Just lasting longer, having bigger AoE, and having some additional healing effect. I think that looks pretty good. It's going to be a lower damage judgment variant than like pious offering stuff, and we're also like not like we probably don't have spell leech or like elemental damage leeches health or spell damage leeches health in this build. If we did, we can consider going over here, but we'll talk about that as we go. One thing that stands out to me is like if we're gonna do this and not have volatile reversal, this looks like a really low damage build. Because we're Javelin, but we're only 1 Javelin. Because we can't proc it off of Lunge, because we're using one-hander plus a shield. The shield disappeared. I don't know where the shield went. I'm going to put a Bastion on, because I assume that's what was there. So we're not spec'd fully into damage for Javelin. We also can't we can't have 3 trails going at the same time, which you can if you're using Lunge. And we also don't have Pious Offering. We don't have these. So, like, We don't really have many sources of damage, and we don't have volatile reversal. So for what it's worth, volatile reversal would give you triple your damage, because it says enemies take 180% increased damage, thereabouts, somewhere. And then we have like kind of 2 movement skills, right? Like we're using we're using Warpath pretty much just because it gives haste, because we're hitting enemies and we have Holy Aura. And then we're also using Lunge, but like Lunge is doing nothing for us, right? Like it's not proccing a Javelin or anything like that. Another thing to note about Warpath, as long as we're talking about this is fine-ish. Enemies are going to be ignited as they walk behind us. But they're already, like, if the enemies are behind us, they're probably getting hit by the Judgment spell Ellie dot, and they're probably standing in our Javelin Holy Trail dot as well. So this is 1 ignite, and we're not really an ignite build, particularly because we're not scaling ignite effect. So this is like not particularly high utility. I'd almost rather just like have Warpath deal damage in a larger area, to be frank, right? Or maybe even like get some extra block up here. Like putting all 5 points in this Juggernaut stance would be a great boon for our defenses, right? Last thing to talk about is the Cyclone of War. The Cyclone of War actually does nothing for us. So it says you have these global stats to your character while spinning, but those global stats, they only apply to an effect that begins while you are Warpathing, while you are spinning. So if you were like Cyclone of War, fire penetration with a scepter, and then your Warpath was applying ignites, and then those ignites would benefit from the fire penetration. That would work. But because we're gonna toss a javelin, and that's the start of the effect, and then we're gonna judgment the ground, and that's the start of that effect, and then we're gonna start Warpathing, there's nothing starting after our Warpath, which means that these nodes actually do nothing for us. So we can just like get all those out of here, and maybe just like put all 5 points into Judgment Stance instead. And then like, do we need maybe some points in Iron Reach just for like dealing damage in a large area? Frankly, that sounds fine. Sounds fine. And then again, like, it's very suspicious that we don't have Sigils of Hope, and we also don't have Volatile Reversal, because those 2 things are absurd. I would want Volatile Reversal more than Sigils of Hope, but realistically, I would probably want both of those things in this build. So it's pretty notable that we don't have either one. Holy Aura as a role player, it does some stuff for us. It gives us like some resistance. It gives us haste on hit. Gives us penetration for like, what, maybe 2/3-ish of our damage. So like it's not doing too much. It's kind of a hard sell not to include Holy Aura in a Paladin build, but you could drop it, or we could drop Lunge, or we could drop Warpath, depending on what you want to do with this character. But again, pretty notable that there's no Volatile Reversal and there's also no Sigils. Let's take a look at the Mastery real quick. We've got some good stuff going on here. We have some extra block nodes. I like that. If we're going to do this and grab these block nodes, I'd like to also grab this 1 pointer to have some extra block chance. And hopefully we have this point as well, which we do, which is great. Let's see what else is going on. All of our penetration is missing here. So this is 16% penetration that applies to both fire and lightning. Remember, Holy Trail is fire and lightning damage, and then your Judgment is only fire damage. So this benefits all of our damage, which is great. If we're a block build, we should be taking these nodes. This is 5 block chance and then health gain on block. We'd really like to have both of these things. And then we have a smattering of points here. I think that's fine. Some extra resistance, that's fine as well. Okay, so I don't mind any of this. This is fine. And then again, I'm a little bit surprised that we don't have Volatile Reversal in this build, given that it triples your damage. So I would try to work that in, if possible. Let's see, what's our crit avoid here? We have 98 crit avoid, so we're probably crit avoid capped, which means we're not taking advantage of the less bonus damage taken from critical strikes. The fact that these Fire Dragon Shoes are here makes me think that this build is trying to be an Ignite build, and it's not. I don't know whether the intent of this build is to be an Ignite build, but I think, like we said at the beginning of this, we want to try to focus as much as possible in one place. Is this going to be a spell dot build using Javelin and Judgment as our primary sources of damage? Or is this going to be an Ignite build? We want one of those two things. Trying to overlap those things is going to give us just like a kind of mediocre version of both. So we'd like to, focus as much in one place as possible. So with that said, we have, see, I'm going to move my camera just for a moment here. We have healing effect and elemental damage. I mean, ideally this would be elemental damage over time because it's just bigger, right? Remember, elemental damage is the lowest roll. It goes up to 53. Normal damage modifiers go up to 70. And then elemental damage over time, for some reason, is huge and goes all the way up to 129. So if possible, if we're going to be a spell damage over time build, we want healing effect, LE dot. Healing effect, LE dot. Healing effect, LE dot. Healing effect, LE dot everywhere, right? That would be ideal for us. I didn't see the shield that we initially had for this character. I'm just going to assume it's like some kind of Bastion. So Bastion's always a great choice. The other unique shield that I see people use from time to time, it's pretty rare, honestly, but Raye's Light is a pretty spicy option. This thing has healing effect built into it, and then it also has some fire damage and +1 levels to Judgment. So if you wanted to stretch your Judgment and maybe go like for Pious Offering for this extra more multiplier, or maybe you wanted to like start working over here for these extra more damage multipliers, if you're willing to give up that the healing from this. If you want to, then there are some other options for you, right? Consecrated Ground, damage against high health, even this would assist you, right? So that's an option for you, unless you just want to go something like Bastion. I play hardcore, I would use Bastion, and I would be real happy about it. Alright, so we've talked about Ignite versus spell damage over time. We've talked about modifiers that do and don't apply while you're spinning. See, Lunge, pretty basic stuff going on here. We talked about this. I see what's going on. For Javelin, some other options that you might have. If you want to keep Judgment in the build, I like the way you spec'd it. Another option, I've seen people try doing this for additional healing and then using it as a movement skill. And then like that would take the place of Lunge and it would take the place of like Warpath maybe. So you could try something like this. I'm not the biggest fan of it. Personally, I feel like Holy Trail does so much damage. I'd rather just have Holy Trail in my build. So I would like to have both Judgment dealing damage and Holy Trail dealing damage. Talked about Holy Aura. That's good. If you're using a Bastion, these block effect nodes are great. We talked about Judgment. Remember, if you're using a Bastion of Honor, things like this node up here that gives you block effect and block chance per active sigil, super strong. It's 45 times 4, so it's like another 180 block effectiveness. Yeah, so this kind of stuff skyrockets in value once you start using a Bastion in your build. Let's talk about gear a little bit. If we're not an Ignite build, ultimately we're going to want a different helmet, maybe just something with as much life and maybe some vitality, maybe some like fire damage over time could be fine. Let's see, Attunement. Attunement does something for us, right? Attunement technically scales Judgment, but the biggest thing about Attunement is that it also gives you mana. So if you want to go the mana route where you're stacking Attunement, maybe you're interested in Pious Offering. And again, if you're interested in Pious Offering, you're also probably interested in Volatile Reversal, because then you can like Judgment, Volatile Reversal, Judgment, Volatile Reversal, in order to spend all your mana, which is big because you're stacking Attunement, and then a Volatile Reversal to get all your mana back. It's an option for you. What else do we have? We can talk briefly about some basic stuff. Remember, whenever you're doing your gearing process, the TLDR of gearing is like, if you can have hybrid life on a piece of gear, you want hybrid life on a piece of gear. If you can have % life on a piece of gear, you want % life on a piece of gear. 99, maybe 9 times out of 10, let's say 90%. 9 times out of 10, that's the approach you want to take. So currently this belt has Cold Res and Crit Avoid, and we have 2100 life. If we fixed this, and if we followed my advice, we would we'd put percent life as a suffix, and because we can get hybrid life, let's put hybrid life in as well. So tier 5, click this, and all of a sudden from 2100 we're at 2400. So 2400, frankly, for a paladin is a pretty low life total, but it's still 300 higher than we were a second ago. Let's take a look at our gloves. Endurance threshold is a pretty weak stat. Pretty much never do you want endurance threshold written on a piece of gear. You would much prefer to have health in pretty much every scenario. The other scenarios where you might consider endurance threshold, if you're playing a Death Seal Lich, is a possibility of building endurance threshold and having it be good, because you're pretty much always at low life. And then also, if you're playing a Mind Over Matter or a damage taken from mana before health mage character, then endurance threshold has pretty good value there. Outside of those two examples, you pretty much never want endurance threshold written on something. So let's click on hybrid health, click, and see what our life total goes to. We were at 21, then we went to 24, now we're at 26. That's pretty good. And let's see, are we missing anything else? Let's try to get flat health on this. I would always prefer to have health or maybe armor as a suffix on my piece of gear. So I'm going to take your physical resistance and hopefully put that somewhere else. Let's see, health, click. And then let's jack this up to tier 5 as well. All of a sudden, we went from 21 to 24 to 25 to 2800 life. Pretty good. And then because we're not an Ignite build, let's take this Calamity and turn it into maybe just a Solarum helmet that has this nice crit avoid implicit. And I'm going to give you a big helmet. I'm going to give you Vitality, percent health, flat health, and then you can have whatever prefix you choose. But I'm just going to use this to estimate your health total. All of a sudden, you have more than 1,000 life above where you started. So that's the kind of thing that you get just from prioritizing the right kinds of stats on your gear. Last thing to discuss, I guess maybe the last thing to discuss, is your idols here. We have these like Ignite on hits, fire damage over time. This one's pretty good. I think this is a great place to be. This like healing effect idol right here is 2x2. If you can get healing effect along with like health, you put 4 of these in a build, whew, that's going to be really, really good if you choose to go with that Javelin Judgment stuff. If you're going for Ignite, then yeah, maybe these other idols end up being a bigger priority for you. But if you're going for the spell damage over time, just something like healing effect and health ends up being a big boon. For pretty much any version of this build, listen, if you end up using like percent health and fire damage, or even like percent health and flat health like this, if you just put a bunch of these onto your character, you'll feel excellent. Percent health and flat health is never the wrong choice. It's always pretty good. Let's take a look at your blessings down across the bottom. Let's see, we have shield drop rate, health. Health's pretty good. I would try to go like spell damage leeches health. I just like having more leech. I think so. You currently have a bunch of healing in your build and you have no leech at all. I would take this and go spell damage leech health. I think that'd be a nice option for this Black Sun blessing. Lightning res looks great. All resistance looks great. And then these last two, we have fizz res. We probably don't need fizz res. In fact, I'm surprised that it's here. Maybe the fact that you're relying on this physical resistance from the Age of Winter is, maybe it comes from the fact that we're not using a bone amulet, which would give us another up to 40 physical resistance. And let's take a look here. You have 8 out of 8 for the fire void res. Gotcha. And then I guess you have no points here, huh? Oftentimes, because most of these builds end up taking volatile reversal, they end up putting 5 or maybe even 10 points into this first node up here in the beginning of Void Knight. And this is another great source of resistances and some flat health for your build. So that's something you might consider too. So if you replace this, listen, if you're using a Bastion, just grab what's it called? Block effectiveness. Block effect blessing plus Bastion of Honor is absolutely nuts in terms of damage reduction. Let's see, the last one you have here is Shred Fire Resistance on hit. If you are including Warpath in your build, I think this is fine. If you're not including Warpath in your build, you're just not hitting enough. So let's assume that you're not going to include Warpath in your build. you can use Endurance Blessing as a possibility. The only problem with the Endurance Blessing is you probably have all of these nodes, which is like a good chunk of your endurance already. And like, it's pretty easy to cap endurance between this node in the Paladin skill tree and the endurance part of Holy Aura as well. This node right here, Shelter from the Storm. So with that said, you probably want maybe just flat armor. You don't have sigils in your build right now, which means you're lacking some flat armor. And God, I mean, flat armor goes a long way. It is a really nice thing to include in your build. But yeah, I would look for not something on hit. If you're just playing Judgment Javelin, you're just not hitting enough to take advantage of any of those things. It's like not even Frailty. But if you're including Warpath, you can do one of those on hit things. If you're not Warpath, armor, fire damage maybe would be just fine. I think that about does it. Let's turn my camera back on here. I think that about does it for what we're looking at. Is there anything else? We're using a scepter right now because of Warpath, because this is Icon of War, but it doesn't work. So we don't have to use a scepter if we don't want to, which means we could try to use like a wand or something. So just keep that in mind for yourself. This is up to 58 spell adapted damage with damage over time, which is pretty good. You might consider using a wand, which is up to 60, but it doesn't have that % damage on it. The benefit of using a crystal wand, if you opted into it, is it has flat mana on it, and flat mana is beneficial if you want to move Judgment into this Pious Offering node over here, because this would reward you for having a big chunk of mana in your build. So that's just an option, something that you should know about, keep in the back of your head as you're gearing up. Okay, that about does it. I think we gave some good feedback on this. It's actually very similar to the build that I'm playing in the background. I've been doing some Javelin Holy Trail Paladin during this weekend race. But I guess if you have any feedback for this build, or for me, or for the people in Twitch chat who are playing these builds, you can always leave that in the comments below, or you can drop by Twitch at twitch.tv/PairThePig, where we're streaming almost every day.